This podcast contains content that is graphic in nature and mature language that may be unsuitable for children or young listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Additional trigger warnings include murder of children and some sexual assault. On August 6, 1987, law enforcement agencies in Caddo Parish had just arrested one of the most disturbing serial killers to ever hit Louisiana, at least up to that point. Come with us as we follow the gruesome trail left by Nathaniel Code Jr., who had left death and destruction in his wake for over 3 years between 1984 and 1987. Join us as we unravel the distinct signature created by a volatile killer, and then hang on as we inspect the crime scenes together and discuss just how a predator becomes such a disturbed individual. Is it genetics, his upbringing, or both? Today on Sin Law, episode 28, The Shreveport Serial Killer. Welcome back to Sin Law. I'm Kelly, and I'm hitting this one by myself. I'm going to go ahead and straight out the gate apologize because this one is late and life happens, and I apologize. But it is true. Life happens. I've been trying to catch back up after we took off for 2 weeks, and it's been a little hectic. It's been a little crazy, but again, thank you guys for sticking around, sticking with me, coming back, and just being awesome in general. So thank you. I'm not really going to do too much crazy stuff here because this case, it's rough. Hurts my heart, hurts everything, makes my stomach hurt. Even though, it's from 1984, 1987 era, it's still very relevant today, and you'll see why. So let's jump right in, guys. Today's episode is going to be about Nathaniel Robert Code Jr., and another one of the ones that I've never heard anything about, never would have come across had I not moved down here and started this podcast based on Louisiana's everybody. So this is one of them. I thought the last episode of Dominique was really, really bad. I mean, obviously because of the numbers, but also because of the ages. They were all, he took a lot of life that hadn't even really begun yet, and that hurts. But this one has a whole different feel to it. I don't know, maybe it's just because it's so gruesome, I guess, and then just the methodical way that he goes about it, and you guys will see what I'm talking about. So we're going to start by getting into a little bit of his background before we get to the awfulness that is everything Code. So he was also known as the Cedar Grove Serial Killer, although he was actually born and was from Shreveport. Cedar Grove is like a small subdivision area that is still, I believe it's still in Shreveport to this day. Nathaniel Robert Code Jr., he was born on March 12th, 1956, and his upbringing was not the greatest. He was raised mostly by his great aunts and his grandfather. His parents divorced about 6 months after he was born. By about 9th grade, he failed out and decided he wasn't going back. So he began living with his uncle Johnny, who was, I believe he was 62 around that time. And in 1971, his uncle actually shot him 4 times with a .22 caliber pistol, which obviously is traumatizing in and of itself to be shot, but being shot by your uncle, the person that you're living with, the adult that you're supposed to be entrusting your life with at that point. Code was only 14 at that time, and he actually had multiple surgeries, and one of the bullets actually lodged near his spine, and his right lung collapsed due to the bullet wounds. His uncle was eventually found with a gun in his pocket. The uncle said that he shot him because of an argument that had started from them having a discussion about Code leaving the house. He wanted him out. So I believe in 74, about 3 years later, the uncle actually got arrested again for 2 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm. However, there was never any other follow-up that I could find. I couldn't figure out just by the newspaper articles or any kind of researching, see what he was charged with, if he served any jail time, if anything came of the shooting of Code when he was 14 and 71, nor did I see any sentencing for that arrest in 74. So I don't actually know. What I do know is that it was all kinds of shady and none of it good, and it had a lasting impression on Nathaniel Code as a 14-year-old boy, because it, kind of put him in that violent direction. And I mean, already it's bad enough that he was not in a good way with his family or his parents, being raised by his great aunt and his grandpa, and then later this guy he called Uncle Joe. So by 1975, Nathaniel Code had already been charged with an aggravated rape and burglary. This was on June 30th in 1975. A 20-year-old woman had been assaulted, and he eventually pled guilty later in November of that same year and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. However, while he was incarcerated, his biological mother, actually passed away. And eventually, Code was released on good behavior after only serving 8 years of his 15-year sentence. And that was in January of 1984. And he began working as a construction worker for, I think it was Fitzgerald Contractors. But after an incident in 85, he actually got fired because he got into it with another coworker, and they were fighting about something on the radio station. Like, he wanted it on a different station or something, and he attacked him. He got fired after that, and it stayed pretty rocky. He couldn't hold down anything steady. So he was born into kind of a tumultuous situation, raised by family members, shot by his, quote, Uncle Joe, unquote. And then by the time he was, how old would he have been? That would have been 71. He was 14, so 75. He would have been 18. So right at like adult age, he was put in jail for 8 years, didn't get out till he was 26. And now he's 26, released from Angola on January 23rd. And there's an event that happens in 84, but we're going to skip that for now. And we're going to talk about the fact that there's a couple events happening. Anyway, he ends up getting married on February 3rd of 1986 to a Miss Vera Mae Bloomer. They made their home within a few blocks of the Cedar Grove neighborhood. Okay. So we already know that he's our serial killer. I talked about it in the intro, and we didn't talk about his background just because it was interesting. So he gets out. As far as anyone knows, he's kind of keeping his nose clean, gets married to he's 30 years old at the time when he marries Vera, who was 22. That was in 86. However, about a year and a half prior, in August of 1984, the very end of August 31st, a murder had occurred in the Cedar Grove area. This murder is what they believe was his first official murder. That would be of 25-year-old Deborah Ann Ford. She was found in her home. She was the mother of two, and as far as I could tell from everything that I read about her, she was an extremely beautiful person, loved her children, was a really good neighbor, all of the things that you would imagine or would hope that somebody would say about you if, it came to pass that you passed away. And everybody was really shocked by this, and the police were actually quoted as saying it was a regular whodunit. There was a $1,000 reward put up, which in 84 is pretty substantial. The scene actually laid out that it was some sort of home invasion type assault, which turned into murder. The day before, Deborah and her two daughters, Nikki and Sean, who were 9 and 5 respectively, they had gone school clothes shopping with Sean's father, Danny Ware. They had gone school clothes shopping and had a great day from all sources. They got home at around 9:30, and the girls ran in to get their overnight clothes and stuff because they were going to go spend the night with their grandma. And the older of the two, Miss Nikki, she noticed that the bathroom door was open. They had a prior burglary at their house, so actually nailed the back door shut and the screens for all the windows on the house. But the only window on the house that didn't have a lock was the bathroom window. And so they had a little rod or stick that they were putting above the window to keep it lodged shut. Okay, so Nikki closed the window. She put the stick in. She closed the door, ran out, and Danny, Sean's dad, drove the two girls to the grandma's house. Now, Deborah had a brief conversation with a neighbor, but she was back home by 10, before 10. And another friend of hers, Michael, he had visited until about 11. And then there was yet another friend who had spoken with her on the phone between 8:30 and the last one was at around midnight 30. And according to everyone, her normal routine, Deborah's, when she was ready for bed, she would actually just fall asleep on the couch in the living room. I don't know if it's because it was cooler or what, but that's where she ended up. That's what her normal routine was sleep, that she'd be asleep in the living room on the couch. So somewhere between midnight 30 and 8 a.m. on August 31st, the screen in the bathroom was dislodged, pried open, and entered. And it had been propped open with a metal piece of something had been propped open. And the reason they know this was the entry point was because there were perfectly aligned, smudged, partial footprints inside or outside the house. And then there was paint debris from the window pane in the bathroom floor as well as outside the bathroom window. And from what police could gather at the time in that investigation was there had been a massive struggle. There was furniture overturned. The cushions on the couch were scattered and disarrayed. She had bruises all over her hands. But in the end, she lost that fight. The autopsy found that she had been strangled and stabbed. She had ligature marks from an electrical cord that was actually cut from a box fan that was found in her kitchen. It was used to tie her hands in a very distinct signature. So the signature that I was speaking about in the intro, this is where that kind of comes into play, because all of us who know anything or listen to any kind of true crime or watch any kind of forensic files, you know about an MO. It's a modus operandi, and that is when what they look for, especially in serial killer cases, because that is something that doesn't change. It's very common, and it goes all the way across all of their crimes. It's the same kind of distinct marker for that serial killer, for that killer. This was Coates. He would tie the hands around in the back of the person. He would leave a loose opening, and then he would anchor it to the left wrist, loop it around the right with space in between, almost like handcuffs, right? And then he would take the either another ligature or the same one if it was long enough, and he would tie their ankles together and then loop that back up through, so they were pretty much hog-tied is what it came down to. And I believe I have a picture of that I'll have in the on the episode on the blog post for this episode on the website, sonlawpodcast.com. She was gagged with clothes also from the house. She had been stabbed, and then her throat was slashed 6 times. So she was stabbed 9 times in the chest. And they found different blood pools in different places, so they know that the struggle had been either ongoing or the struggle had continued, and they went from the couch, and then she was drugged to the floor because they could see the blood trail. She was stabbed 9 times in the chest, twice on the left side, and 7 times on the right. And some of these stab wounds were deep enough. They entered her lungs. And it didn't end there. When he dragged her to the floor, he dragged her yet again to the middle of the room, and that's where he slashed her throat 6 times, going from right to left. He severed her jugular vein, her carotid artery, her larynx, esophagus, and these cuts got almost to the spine. So she was nearly decapitated, and she was still alive when her throat was cut. Her official cause of death was cumulative blood loss, and the coroner actually estimated that this attack lasted anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes. Just absolutely gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching. I can't, especially in severe stressful situation, time seems to slow down. I can't imagine. Now, a friend who had come by to borrow her phone, because remember, this is back, we're talking 84, we ain't got cell phones, and you'll hear me here in a minute, we'll talk about his use of phone cords. So when I'm talking about phone cords, I'm not talking about charger cords, I'm talking about that old school spiral cord that used to connect, I know kids, they connected your phone to the base, which was then plugged into a wall called a landline. Yeah, I know I'm being sarcastic, but seriously, my daughter would have no idea. So the friend had stopped by to borrow the phone, and oddly enough, knowing this family and knowing Deborah, that she never had her door open. Like, it was always locked. She always was very tight on security because she had already had that burglary I mentioned. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, she found the door open and could hear the stereo playing music. And this friend walked into a horrifying sight that never left her, I'm sure. She was found in the middle of the room wearing only her nightgown, which had been turned inside out. With the amount of injuries and the fact that she died from blood loss, I'm sure it was a nightmarish scene to walk into. By the time the police got there and set up the perimeter, a crowd had started to gather outside of the house. Guess who was a part of that crowd and actually had discussions with the other neighbors about what had happened? You're freaking correct. You know, when they say they like to revisit the crime scene, this is why. This is where that comes from. The studying of people like Nathaniel Code Jr., who, he loved it. He loved revisiting. He loved replaying. He loved the idea of him being the cause of something. Something was like this. He did this. This was his orchestra, that he was conductor of this symphony of chaos. And so, yeah, he actually showed up outside the house that morning and talked to other people about the murder and what had happened and how terrible and so on and so forth. Yeah. So that's bonkers. But a lot of the people in the neighborhood knew him because, like I said, he only lived a couple blocks from this Cedar Grove neighborhood. And, you know, he was just a part of that group. Now, they didn't mention neutral was mostly the vibe that I got, but he was still, you know, well known. Everybody knew each other. It was very, you know, not really close-knit neighborhood, but definitely howdy neighborhood. So Dr. George McCormick was the coroner, I believe, on all of these cases, and he is the first person in all of the information that I read, all of the sources that I got. He was the first one to say that there was a clear signature and this was obviously a serial killer and that he would kill again. He was very determined to make sure that the law enforcement were aware, and he even went so far as to give them the 4 signature elements and why these elements led him to believe that this was a single person and he would kill again, and these are the signatures you're going to look for in the next murder because there's absolutely going to be more. So he said the first element would be so it's kind of a bundle deal here. So he used a knife first off, and then he used 2 different methods of murder. So he got, the first element would be the stabbing, so the deep, you know, attack with a knife stabbing, and then the slashing or cutting of the throat. That was 1 and 2. The third one was the very distinct bindings and the unique ligature strangulation type. Well, basically just that the way that he bound him. So the binding in and of itself was a signature, but then the distinctive way that he did it would it be in and of itself another. So he also said that this serial killer is right-handed. And that's basically what they had to go on to begin with. But other than that, it was a whodunit, and Nathaniel Code Jr. went on about his happy life, right? Although they did actually get a little bit of information from this crime scene. They had 3 latent palm prints and a thumbprint that were on the bathroom windowsill, and on the inside wall under the windowsill. And they found that these were consistent and recent because it was obvious that the bathroom had either been wiped off or recently cleaned. And even though at some point in his past, Nathaniel Code Jr. had actually been a plumber, there was no record to show that he had ever been in that house in Deborah's house, nor did they had no way of saying that there was any other time that he would have been in that house prior to the murder being committed. So there would be no reason or actual good defense as to why his fingerprints would have been in there, or palm prints. So even with all that, and they did later identify those fingerprints as Code's. Like I said, he went on about his life, and he got married in February of 86. And then, there were, so some people say that he could have 4 additional murders, and those 4 murders actually happened within the June 85 to December 86 time period. And that would have been in and around the same time as the other homicides that we're going to speak about, but they were never verified to be, and he never confessed to those. So I'm just going to briefly mention them in between here. So in August 31st, 84 was Deborah Ann Ford. That was her homicide. In June 24th of 85, Wes Burks, he was murdered. 48 years old. He was discovered in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor of his St. Vincent Avenue home. He was stabbed multiple times, and he was identified as a suspect. Code was identified as a suspect, but he was never charged. And then July 18th of 85, the body of Monica Renee Barnum, 20 years old, was discovered by her mother in an apartment on Ashton Street. And she was bound, stabbed, and strangled with a wire coat hanger that was left around her neck. Again, Code was named as a person of interest, but he was never arrested or charged in connection with that killing. And that takes us up to the next actual connected and charged murder. And this is the one that they initially, because of the amount of evidence, this is the one they went with first. That they got the first charges and trial and all of those things. So it was less than a year later, so August 31st of 84. This was July 19th of 85. And it was literally just a short walk, a few blocks from Deborah Ford's home. It was the home of Vivian Colbert Cheney, who was 37 at the time of her death. She lived there with her boyfriend, Billy Joe Harris, who was 28, her daughter, Carletha Colbert, who was 15, her brother, Jerry Colbert, who was 25, and her other 2 daughters, Tamika and Marla. I think that's right. Oh, 10 and 7. I apologize. 10 and 7. So, good news for now. The 2 youngest were discovered unharmed, alive, sleeping in their beds when the other bodies were discovered. However, the same cannot be said for Vivian, Billy Joe, Jerry, and Carletha. Somewhere between 11:30 on the 18th and 6 a.m. on the 19th, the back door was pried or forced open, and each member, Vivian, Billy Joe, Jerry, and Carletha, were all murdered. They were found in separate rooms of the house. Every victim was in a separate room. And it goes in a way, and we'll go through it. Let's just go through it, and then we'll kind of touch on it. So Billy Joe, who was the 25-year-old boyfriend, he was found in the front bedroom, and he was actually killed by gunshot. So what they believe happened, or what the coroner, I think, postulated after he got the information, that he said that it was indicative of a logical progression. So knowing that there were going to be more people in this house, more adults in this house, more than one victim in this house, that the gun obviously would have been brought in as a form of control, especially for the men or the more threatening victims. So he comes in and he shoots 2 shots through a pillow into the left side of Billy Joe's head, and then he shoots him twice in the chest. But Billy Joe was a tough mother. He was still alive after he shot him 4 times. So then Code cut his throat and tied him up then with his shoelaces. And again, this was the hog-tied scenario I told you about earlier, which may have been confusing. But he tied him up with shoelaces that were found in the house, and electrical cord was used to connect the ankles, which had shoelaces, and the wrists, which had shoelaces. He used an electrical cord to connect those two. He was fully clothed and had no ligature marks around the neck or anywhere. And then the next victim, they believe, was Jerry Colbert, who was 25. He was found in the back bedroom, 1 shot in the left side of the head. He was in bed, no struggle, no ligatures, fully clothed, shot him where he lay. Now, Carlitha, the 15-year-old daughter, she was in the living room where she had probably fallen asleep on the couch. And she was found on her stomach, and it looked like she'd either been tied and then kind of wrangled a little bit loose, or it had been attempted and he didn't get to fully tie her. But same kind of wrist wrapping, ankle wrapping, but the connector was loose. So she just had her ankles and wrists bound, but they weren't connected. She was also gagged. She had duct tape. It'd been used to gag her, so he had just wrapped it around her. And then she was found only with shorts on, and they were inside out. Her throat had been cut, but this didn't kill her. She was still alive, and then she was moved from an area to a different part, or back up to onto the couch, I'm not sure. And the reason they know this is because there were 2 large pools of her blood found, and one was by her left knee, and then the other one was up near her neck, where they hypothesized that she had been cut on the neck, and then dragged a little ways, or she had crawled a little ways, and he had cut her throat again, and that was when she bled to death. Now, the blood pool by her left knee had a semicircle of, it looked like it had been absorbed. So, like, if you had stuck a rag on the top and just, like, pushed down, that's what it looked like. There was a semicircle that had drier blood in the middle of that blood pool, which will make sense here in a second. Now, the last victim that they found in the house was that of Vivian Colbert Cheney. They found her in the bathroom, slumped over, so like from her waist up, her head hanging into the bathtub. She was slumped over that away, face down into the bathtub. There was a telephone cord around her hands and waist, which went between her legs and then down to her ankles, which would have allowed her to still kind of walk. I think they quoted it as a hobbling walk. And they also had evidence of a neck ligature, which was to them reminiscent of a collar. So basically what they were assuming was that he tied her in such a way that she would still be allowed to kind of stumble around, and he could lead her around by this ligature collar that he made for her. And this is where that bloodstained semicircle comes in. The dress that she was found in when they found her body in the bathroom had a large blood stain, which later was proven to be Carlitha's, and the buttock area. So the large pool of blood that had the drier blood in the center in the semicircle had been caused by her being made to sit beside her daughter's body while she was bleeding out from the neck and watch her, because that's the only way that would have been on the buttock area of that dress. Now, her cause of death showed that obviously she was the main target of this attack, simply because there was more time and more energy put into her murder. She was violently beat around the head. She was strangled by both ligature and manual strangulation. And then she was taken to the bathroom, and where her head was shoved underwater until she died. So it was a combination of manual strangulation and drowning that was determined to be her cause of death. Now, the bodies were discovered on July 19th, that same morning, what they assume happened either from the night before at 11, sometime between 6 a.m., because her sister, Shirley, had decided to make a surprise visit. Hadn't told anybody she was coming and just decided to go see them. And when she got there, she knocked. There was no answer at the front door, but she could hear music playing on the stereo. Does that sound familiar, guys? So she went around to the back door, which, when she knocked, it opened on its own. And she went ahead and entered the house and started looking for people. When she realized what had happened and saw the scene, she frantically started looking for the younger two. She found them fast asleep, and they were actually super difficult to wake up. Now, it should be noted that both Tamika and Marla were mentally handicapped. Vivian, Carlitha, and Billy Joe, they all had some kind of sight impairment. So not only are we talking about victims on average, but these were all impaired in some way, and the only upside to this event was that the two younger children were spared. When they were awoken, however, by the neighbor that found the bodies, they were frantic, absolutely lost their minds, which is understandable in that situation. And the friend took them outside, called 911, and then everything unfolded from that point, again with the crowd outside, so on and so forth. And after some time, they realized that there were several items missing from the household. So I think it was Jerry's wallet was gone. There was a jar of loose change. There were food stamps and the food stamps ID card that you had to have at the time, so you couldn't use one without the other. There were framed pictures of the girls and this red, like, candy cane striped tote bag that was all missing. There was also no money found, like no cash found in the house. And from reports, Vivian had cashed a $100 check just the day before. Now, remember, they had gone school shopping, so maybe she had spent some of it there, but there should have been some sign or evidence of a cash somewhere in the house if she had cashed a $100 check. We're talking, again, 85, so that probably would have gone a lot longer than just school clothes shopping, whereas now you have to spend $300 or $400 and not even put a dent in it. So, again, the same corner, Dr. McCormick, he said, again, this was one person. It was a serial killer. He was alone, and that this was an escalation of the Deborah Ford murder. He made the allegation that it was likely someone who lived nearby or in the neighborhood, the same neighborhood. He also said that the scene was indicative of the logical progression, like we talked about earlier with the gun that was used to control the adults and the teenagers. And his theory worked out something like this. So he used the gun to threaten Carlitha and kept her compliant. Then he held her at gunpoint to be able to control Vivian and Billy Joe, while he tied up Vivian and Carlitha and then Billy Joe in that order. He then went to the back bedroom, shot Jerry, remember, because he was found with just the one bullet wound and still in bed. And then he came back and he then made the first cut on Carlitha's throat, the one that didn't kill her. And he made Vivian watch this entire process and made her even sit close enough to where she got the blood on the back of her dress. Then he, quote, walked by the collar, ligature, Vivian to the bathroom and forcefully put her head in the water while likely choking or strangling her with the ligature and or manual strangulation at the same time. At which point he left her as she died there in the bathroom, still slumped over the tub, returned and made the second cut to Carlitha's neck and either moved her or she had moved that far in that process, and he nearly cut her head off with that last cut. So eventually he killed Billy Joe. He didn't really make a statement as to whether it was before or after he finished killing Carlitha, but he does surmise that it was done after Vivian was dead. Now, earlier I said that they found a duct tape was used as a gag in Carlitha's case, and they happened to find the same type of duct tape in the alley behind the house that was used to gag Carlitha. They also found a latent left palm print on the bathtub, and McCormick said that the left-hand palm print was in a place that was not a place that someone would use to stabilize themselves getting in or out of the bathtub. The way that it was positioned with the way that Vivian's body had laid, it was used to stabilize so the right-handed person could then use the other dominant hand to forcefully push the head into the water. And that the bathroom had all of the signs of being cleaned regularly. So these prints, again, there was no reason for them to be in there otherwise in any other situation if he had or hadn't been in the house before. So eventually that palm print was attached to Code. And on that same morning, they had further evidence in a witness that was jogging at the time, and around 2:15, former National Guard neighbor in the area that knew Junior Code and saw him. They spoke to each other and just kind of like, "Hey, what's up, man? How's it going?" And noticed that he had a brown bag that was like rolled up under his arm. And, they said they're whatever's, hey, whatever, bye. And then, oddly enough, about 45 minutes later, he saw Code again going in a different direction or opposite direction. And he said he was covered in blood. And so, of course, he's like, "Hey, dude, are you okay? Is everything all right? What's going on?" And Code told him, quote, "I got into it with somebody, but luckily he, quote unquote, came out on top, and that he had gotten even." And another thing noticed the second time around was that he no longer had the rolled up brown bag. He now had a candy cane red and white striped tote bag. Now, at the same time, at whatever time it was, early in the AM, I'm assuming, he said that at that point, Code tried to sell him things that were in the bag. There was a knife that he described as a 7 to 8 inch dagger. There was a gun. There were credit cards, food stamps, and marijuana. There was also, as it wasn't bad enough already that, he's out early AM, covered in blood, randomly on the side of the road. The food stamps that he had just tried to sell to this neighbor They were smothered and smeared in blood. But initially, he didn't connect this. The jogger neighbor didn't. He didn't connect that to the Cheney murders. When he heard about them, it didn't click in his mind. And a few days later, Code came up to him when he saw him again, all like frazzled and out of sorts, and said, "Hey man, what'd you see me do?" And the jogger says, "I don't know what the hell you're talking about. What's going on? I don't know. What do you mean?" And Code, he said, made this reaction of gritting his teeth, clenching his fists, and was obviously and visibly agitated by his answer. It just so happened that was the same reaction that Code had when this jogger got on the witness stand in trial. So that was pretty crazy. There was one more witness, I believe, that also saw Code the morning of the 19th at around 5:30 a.m. and said that he saw Code just standing outside of the Cheney house staring at the house. And this was hours before the bodies were ever found. But still, again, no arrest was made, and they continued the ongoing investigation. And I apologize profusely. I did not realize that I was going to have a part 1 and part 2, although I have gone back and edited part 1 at the end of my intro. But I got to the editing stage, and I cut it out as much as I possibly could. I think the original recording was about an hour and 52 minutes, something like that. It was a good long chunk because I got really deep into the death penalty and the stuff with Louisiana and the reason it's such a cluster ball right now. But I just wanted to apologize because I didn't mean to split this up. But the good news is that means you guys will get more content this month because I'm going to put this one out tomorrow, which will be Monday. And then the following Monday, Tuesday, I will release part 2. So apologize, but you're welcome. Thank you. I love you. Otherwise, this would have been an hour and 32 minutes for one episode. And I feel like that's too much of a chunk, too much of a bite. So just breaking it up and separating it for you guys is listening convenience. Thank you. Love you. You guys are great. Again, sincerest apologies. And I've also got all of the other links that'll be down there, and you can look at pictures and things like that I found and came across. That'll be attached to the website on the blog post there. If you get a minute, rate, review, give me a thumbs up, give me a hey, what's up. You can even text me immediately if there's something in here and you want to say you got this wrong, you said that wrong, because I'm not from here. Maybe I did. You can send me a text. Some of the platforms that you listen on, they allow you to click a button down there. It's at the very top of the episode note, source note, whatever it is, down there underneath the episode in the description. It says text us now. You click that and you can send us a text. It comes immediately to my phone. No email or nothing. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you so much for coming back. I hope to keep... I'm trying to get all of these stories out because there's just so many that are amazing and awesome and outrageous and incredible and devastating and all of the things that us as true crime lovers and fiends and... I did see a thing the other day that said people who listen to murder shows to sleep at night have something fundamentally wrong with them. I could have told you that. Either way, I still love you, awesome nerds. Thank you. Check us out. All of our socials, Twitter, X, whatever, or TikTok. Check out the website. If you want to support the show, you can go to Patreon. You know, we have... I think it's a membership for $5, and I'll send you some cool care package with some cool groovy stuff in it. It's got the Sin Law on it, and you can share that with your family and friends and be awesome like me. Sin Lawsome. Thank you guys so much. Take care out there.
This has been an Elf Audio production.